There's Toussaint Louverture. He was enslaved in the colony of San Domingue, which is essentially the French side of Santo Domingo, right? Which is essentially today Haiti, and which is on the west side of the Dominican Republic. Just like a lot of the islands at the time, it was a sugar colony. 1697, the French had taken it over from the Spanish and had pretty much owned and operated and controlled the area until 1791. Toussaint Louverture, his father, was from the Bight of Benin. You guys remember the Bight of Benin? That's where the Fawn people come from. That's where your religion of Ifa and some of your pantheon of deities like Ogun, Oshun, Yemaya, and all that stuff, they all come from that region. Well, something happened in 1783. 1783, the American Revolution had come to an end. Now, for the first time in a long time, there was free and open trade between San Domingue and the United States of America. So all this did was increase the demand for sugar coming out of San Domingue. And when it increased the demand for sugar coming out of San Domingue in 1783, they obviously had to do what in San Domingue? Get more slaves. So they started to bring in a lot of slaves after 1783. In fact, if you look at I think it was about 800,000 Africans imported into San Domingue between the years 1697 and 1791. A third of them were imported in those last 8 years. 1/10 of them were imported in that final year between 1790 and 1791. So it goes to show you the magnitude in which they were importing slaves in that final phase of San Domingue's existence. They were bringing in mostly Africans from, around this time, they were bringing them mostly from the Congo. In the year 1791, right before the Haitian Revolution broke out, there were 20,000 whites in the island, or in the colony. There were 30,000 free people of color, which were the descendants of, the blacks and the whites that have cohabitated and that kind of thing. And then there were 500,000 enslaved people. Anybody here knows math? That's about 90% of the population is enslaved. And that's not considering the runaway slaves who live in the mountains. They had a maroon community there as well, who are undocumented. Haitian Revolution breaks out. This is 2 years after the French Revolution in 1789. Now, just like one of the questions that Reem asked earlier, like, why did this happen? Was it the French that caused this, or was it a lot of historians in the past used to attribute the Haitian Revolution to the ideals being disseminated by the French during their revolution. The French Revolution was all about what? Equality, fraternity, brotherhood, all this type of fancy stuff, right? Well, later on, scholars started to discover that the Africans were bringing with them their own philosophy, their own ideals of freedom and egalitarianism. In fact, on the night that the Haitian Revolution broke out, August 14th, 1791, there was a slave by the name of Dutty Boukman. Dutty Boukman led this voodoo ceremony, and in the voodoo ceremony, they invoked the god of war, known as Ogun. Ogun was the god of war. He was also the god of civilization. He was also the god of metallurgy, metalwork. And he was also the god that had the machete. Now, if anybody knows anything about sugar plantations, what do you need to cut the sugar?
Machete.
The machete. How convenient. All those Africans had machetes. Ogun's weapon was the machete. And they invoked that spirit. And that spirit possessed the bodies of one of the women that day. They started playing the drums to invoke that spirit. Next thing you know, everybody gets rallied up. Everybody's galvanized. And they go to war. See, it was the free people of color, the poor whites and the rich whites that were fighting about politics and who should get what rights on the island, while the 500,000 enslaved Africans, 2/3 of whom were actually born in Africa, were like, are they seriously fighting about that? Life expectancy on a Haitian plantation was about 3 to 5 years. They were working people to death. Wasn't like in the United States of America where typically, you know, they wanted to biologically reproduce your kind by breeding you. No, they were going to work you to death and they were going to import some new ones. By 1793, it was obvious that the French were going to lose the island, so the British and the Spanish tried to come in and take it over. The British and the French and the Spanish were all battling for this island, but the French realized the only way we're going to secure this island is if we ally ourselves with the Africans who are in revolt. So they did. And one of the things that they did was they abolished slavery. So the French Assembly at the time abolished slavery not only in San Domingue, but also abolished slavery all throughout the French Caribbean. Martinique, Guadeloupe, both abolished slavery as well. So Toussaint Louverture ended up rising to prominence in the military. He rose and he defeated the Spanish. He defeated the British. He ran them out of the island. But then in 1801, something happened. Napoleon Bonaparte, he comes into power. And he decides to come back down and enter into San Domingue and reinstitute the institution of slavery. And so the blacks in Haiti were like, oh, hell, not again. So they had to fight again. And this time they weren't holding anything back. They kicked the French out of San Domingue. January 1st, 1804, they established an independent Haiti. They abolished the institution of slavery. By 1822, they even went over to the Spanish side and abolished slavery in the Dominican Republic as well. They even offered land to all African Americans who were going to escape the United States and make it down into Haiti. They offered land to them. They even assisted Simón Bolívar in his revolutionary endeavors in Latin America under the condition that he abolishes slavery in those countries. So they weren't only concerned about abolishing slavery in their own country, but they were exporters of abolition. Where in our country, we talked about all men are created equal and all this stuff, right? So Thomas Jefferson, who's a founding father, you look at it and you see like his ideals, but you see his actions, they conflict with one another. But when you look at the founding fathers of a place like Haiti, they actually coincide with some of the ideals and some of the things that they actually talk about. So it's not contradictory to actually have a monument devoted to Toussaint Louverture in Haiti that actually represents the ideals of freedom. But when you have this man, if you want to call him that, Thomas Jefferson, representing those ideals, but he wasn't practicing those things, it just makes a lot of people call into question, what's this country really stand for? Toussaint Louverture ended up getting captured. He was imprisoned and he died in the year 1803. Jean-Jacques Dessalines ended up taking over as president. He engaged in a policy of genocide at that point. Any white that remains on the island and doesn't get out in 24 hours is going to be killed. What do you guys think about that?
So, Dr. add something to what you're saying. So, Haiti was the first black nation established by ex-slaves. Opened it up to other people of African descent all over the world. Come here, we got a country, we govern ourselves. However, you now are part of an international network. And so your European powers, including America, decided that they would not work with Haiti as a country. They would not recognize it as a country. They would not trade with it. England agreed, France agreed, America agreed. All of your European countries agreed, we will not work with Haiti. We want Haiti to fail so that other enslaved people won't get the idea that they can do the same thing and it will work. and they strategically made sure that Haiti would not prosper as a country in and of itself. Not only that, but Haiti had to pay France back for every single slave that was freed, and they just finished paying France back 1947.
So and they paid $21 billion to France.
Right, and so people talk about how poor Haiti is. You've got to look at the history of Haiti. Haiti is now poor because the people don't know how to run the country. Haiti is poor because it was orchestrated that way from jump, so that you would not get inspired by that and revolt yourselves.
And in fact, the United States of America was one of the last countries to acknowledge Haiti as an independent country. And it wasn't until the Civil War, 1862, that we decided to do so. Question?
You know how they speak Creole? How did that come about? If they were owned by the French, how did their language get misinterpreted to also their own, in
So
the
it's
process?
It's like a lot of the Africans, even in the United States of America, you find certain people that don't talk exactly like the official way of speaking, right? They call it Ebonics. In Jamaica, they call it patois. In Cuba, they have their own version. And then, Haiti has their own version of that. It's Creole. Language is really a fluid thing. So African people, they're never taught to read or write. So they're just taught to communicate. So they're communicating. So it's just as much of a language as English or French are. It's just their own version of it, the plantation language, the enslaved people's language. And so that's just their way of communication. And as long as they can understand each other, that's how it works. Obviously, the lingua franca was French, so that's the language that everybody has to operate through. So that's why most of your nouns and verbs and stuff like that in French Creole are actually French. In Haitian Creole and French, but there are a lot of words that are not French.
And it is kind of like here in America, what we call ghetto talk. It really is, from an academic standpoint, they call it African American vernacular language. There is a certain language that black people have as a subgroup that may not, it's based in standard English, but it is not part of the larger English lexicon. But it's stuff when we get around ourselves, we let the R's slip away. We don't say floor, we say flow. Can you get the dough for me? But when we're around white people, we say, oh, can you get the door for me? Right. You slip into that language. And let me say this. There's an article by a West African linguist who have traced the patterns of black speech to linguistic patterns on the west coast of Africa. And in certain languages in the west coast of Africa, which is where most of the people in the New World come from, there is no sound for the letter R. So if a slave is brought to an English-speaking country and that slave is taught broken English only to follow orders, when you're training that person and whatever this thing here is in his or her language, you say floor, that slave says flow, because there's no R. It's kind of like in Hispanic cultures where the R's are rolled. There's a certain way you pronounce certain things, but there's no word, no sound for the letter R. So slaves developed the speech where they say flow and dough and mo. And now we talk that way and we say, oh, that's uneducated speech. You're speaking with a West African dialect. You don't even know it.
Wow.
And there's also no STR in West Africa. That's why people come around here and call out some scream. Right up. That's
Scrimp.
Scrimp. That's only in Florida. I never hear people talk like that in D.C. No one says scream.
Y'all a little more assimilated in the culture. All right, so let's move on.